A visit with John Paul II, a News 10 special reported by Bob Grip.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Grip, reporting from Rome. During this next half hour, we'll bring you to this history-filled city, one that has past and present ties to the Mobile area. Here's why we're here. Every 5 years, Catholic bishops from all over the world come to Rome and the Vatican for a private meeting with the Pope. It's called the Ad Limina. It gives the local bishops and the Pope a chance to exchange views, concerns, and hopes. One of those making a visit this year is Mobile Archbishop Oscar Lipscomb. We went along for an exclusive inside look at the Vatican.
Now hear him as he speaks to us, those words forever blessed. All you labor, come to me, and I will give you rest.
The setting was the Hall of Blessings in the Vatican, a sight seen by few visitors. This morning, it was the scene of the Pope's private Mass, one to which we were the only television crew invited to attend. Archbishop Lipscomb and the 23 other American bishops in Rome for their ad limina visits joined the Pope in the celebration of the liturgy.
All our hopes and plans and all the needs and concerns of the people of God has given us to love and serve.
For some of those invited to attend, the emotion of the moment was too overwhelming to control.
When they came to Jesus, they found he was already dead. And so instead of breaking his legs, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a lance.
All of us could also see another man absorbed in prayer, the 263rd successor to St. Peter, the first non-Italian pope in 455 years, and the first ever Polish pope, the man known for most of his life as Karol Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II.
When supper was ended, he took the cup, gave the thanks, praise, gave the cup to his disciples, and said, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. This is the cup of my blood, the blood of the new and everlasting covenant. It will be shed for you and for all men, so that sins may be forgiven. Do this in memory of me."
At the conclusion of Mass, the bishops joined the Pope for the final blessing in Latin.
Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo,
sit nomen Domini benedictum,
et hoc nunc et usque in seculo,
aiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini,
qui feci caelum et terra,
benedicat vos omnipotens Padre et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
After Mass ended, all of those who attended the Pope's Mass had the chance to meet him. He first greeted the Mobilians studying in Rome. Then, when Archbishop Oscar Lipscomb introduced me, I greeted the Pope in Old Slavonic, the language of my grandparents, one with common links to his native Polish.
This is our television commentator from Mobile. He is.
Slava Isusu Christu.
The moment passed quickly, but will stay with me for a long time to come. Later that morning, after having met with Archbishop Lipscomb and all the other bishops privately, the Pope brought them together for a final meeting, a kind of papal pep talk on prayer.
We must invoke it for the Church here and now, and see it also as the hallmark of the Church of the Millennium.
The Pope's general audience on Wednesdays is far from private. as Bishop Keith Simons of Pensacola, Tallahassee admitted.
Yes, it's always a joy to come to Rome, but especially the Wednesday audiences are always very exciting.
The audience is held either outside in St. Peter's Square or inside this hall, opened in 1971. During our visit, 12,000 people filled the giant auditorium to hear the Pope greet visitors in several languages and to hear them respond, including one group from Poland, which broke into song. After the Pope and the visiting American bishops blessed the crowd, the Pope left the stage to meet the people. As always, he turned his attention first to a special area of the hall near the front, set aside for the sick. Mothers handed babies to the edge of the crowd, hoping to get a papal blessing for their children. As it turned out, we weren't the only Mobilians at the general audience. Mike Guarino and his family had front row seats and a unique opportunity to spend a few seconds with the Pope. Archbishop Lipscomb told me while the personal contact is important, the Pope has another reason for this kind of meeting.
He never gives one of these things just to see people. He always has a very powerful witness himself to the presence of Christ in his office. He is always a teacher and a pastor when he comes into an audience situation. And he never lets the people forget it either.
Of course, during the weekly general audience, the focus is on the Pope, but there is plenty to see here every day at St. Peter's Square. Designed by Bernini in the mid-1600s, the square took 11 years to complete. Its rows of columns reach out like arms, welcoming visitors and offering them the space needed to appreciate the immense size and grandeur of the center of attention, St. Peter's Basilica. At the center of the square is this obelisk, brought to Rome from Egypt in the year 37 and moved to this site in 1585. A relic of the cross on which Christ was crucified is preserved at the top. The entire square is a giant art gallery for anyone who takes the time to look. While the beauty of the square is impressive, it simply provides an introduction to the other architectural masterpiece there, St. Peter's Basilica, the largest Christian church in the world, built over what many experts believe is the burial site of the man regarded as the first pope, St. Peter. While the church has been on this site for more than 1,600 years, the St. Peter's we see today was dedicated in the early 1600s after work that took 120 years. Spanning the reigns of 20 popes and the work of 10 architects. Inside the basilica, everything is so well proportioned, the church appears large but not overwhelming. It contains 450 statues, 500 columns, 50 altars, and can hold an estimated 60,000 people. The church is so big, it is longer than 2 football fields placed end to end zones included. One of those visiting St. Peter's while we were there was John Cardinal O'Connor, the Archbishop of New York.
Anyone who would attempt to describe St. Peter's would be very foolish indeed. It is literally indescribable. It's perhaps one of the only places in the world that would merit the description indescribable. It's not only vast, it's just so majestic. It's solemn without being pompous. It's filled with joy. You look around, you see the light streaming in. and it's filled with the centuries, you know. I never feel overwhelmed in here. I think that as a lifetime Catholic, I just get caught up in it. I feel part of it. I think Catholics get excited. Many non-Catholics just get a sense of wonder. Many non-Catholics have never seen or experienced anything like it, and it's awesome to them. I think Catholics, your word is a good one, are more prone to get excited than awestruck.
The dome above the papal altar is the work of Michelangelo. Beneath it is the canopy or baldachin designed by Bernini, unveiled 355 years ago. It's 96 feet high and made of bronze. The columns supporting it are decorated with vines, wreaths, and bees, the symbol of the family to which the reigning pope at the time belonged. Below the main altar is the Confessio, containing an ornate gold box holding the cloaks or pallia given by the pope to new archbishops. Bernini also designed this, an extraordinary work called St. Peter's Chair. It contains the remains of an ancient chair said to have been used by St. Peter, but historians now believe the chair instead dates from the late 800s. In a dark corner of the basilica is the statue of Pope Leo XII, who sent Mobile its first missionary bishop, Michael Portier. Around the corner is perhaps the most beautiful piece of sculpture in the world, Michelangelo's Pietà.
The Pietà in Rome is just part of the altar decorations. When I was a student priest, we used to say Mass at that altar all the time. Now you'll find it's enclosed in a protective shield because of vandalism that had harmed it in the past. And this is a tragedy, but I can well recall the hardest thing about saying Mass at the altar of the Pietà when I was a student priest here is the altar boys didn't like to go all the way to the end of the basilica where it's located, and they would try to sort of cajole you into saying Mass a little closer to the sacristy. But it's a beautiful experience just to watch it. In early days, to offer Mass in front of it was, you know, almost heaven itself. It was special.
On the level just below the basilica are the grottos, the burial sites of many recent popes, like John the 23rd, who convoked the Second Vatican Council but never lived to see the end of it. His successor, Paul VI, who helped carry out the changes mandated by the Council. And Pope John Paul I, the so-called Happy Pope, who died just 34 days after his election as Pope. It was here, within a few feet of these popes and many others, the American bishops renewed their allegiance to the successor of Peter at the altar of Christ the King.
He rules the universe in wondrous unity.
On the other side of the Tiber River, along a narrow, noisy road called Humility Street, is the Casa Santa Maria. For 2 years in the 1950s, it was the home away from home of then-student Oscar Lipscomb. Its high walls, courtyard, and beautiful gardens bring peace and quiet to those who live here in one of the busiest sections of Rome.
Well, this is where mail call always took place, and we used to stand down by that fountain and desperately wait for a letter from home, much like servicemen waiting a mail call. And the senior student would stand there and call out the names, and only about a third would get a mail call. Occasionally, maybe twice a week, a box of cookies or pastry or foodstuffs would come in, and that would be cause for great rejoicing for that gentleman and all of his friends, and some new friends that he never even knew he had before. They would all follow him to his room, and everything would be devoured rather quickly.
How did your parents feel about having you away for 4 years like that?
I didn't ask them. It was the day of the church. Remember when they said, you want to be a priest? This is what it takes to be a priest.
The chapel of Casa Santa Maria is another one of Rome's art treasures.
This chapel was only used for great solemn and sacred events every Sunday, special high feast days, of which there were about 2 or 3 during a month in Rome. And any events that were particularly special to the college. It evokes so much of history. For example, this house was in existence before the Pilgrims set foot on Plymouth Rock. They didn't come till 1607, and this church was built, and the foundation of Visitation Sisters was established here in 1598. Well, after I was ordained, just a block away, then I returned. A first Mass for any priest is special, and because it was, I don't know, close in my heart to the first days in Rome, and it's a small enough place to have a very good, intimate liturgy. My mother and father had come over for that occasion, and so at the main altar, I offered the first Mass on July 16th, 1956. I never come into this chapel that I don't feel in a way like I've kind of come home. It perhaps does not mean as much to me as the cathedral in Mobile, but it comes a close second best, it really does.
The 4 seminarians from the Mobile Archdiocese now studying in Rome live at a different site. It's called the North American College, one with a beautiful view of Rome and the Vatican nearby.
From the roof, you will find a marvelous panorama of the city of Rome. And this college just offers the best scene at which to get an overview of all of Rome.
Mobile Archbishop Thomas Tulin came here for the dedication ceremony. Student Oscar Lipscomb lived here right after the complex opened in 1953.
During my formative years leading to priesthood, everything took place after a slight preparation at home at the Benedictine Abbey, St. Bernard's. Everything took place here in the city of Rome. And we spent 6 years over. Those who did were able to come home for one summer, and I did, in the summer of 1954, and then returned. Students come from all over the country. This is the National College for the United States of America, priestly formation in the city of Rome. The students attend a variety of universities depending upon what their bishops want them to specialize in priestly ministry later.
What makes Rome unique?
You see a city, whose roots go back to, 500-600 years before the birth of Christ. And in it you will find the kinds of things that are contrasts. You have saints that are very, very good saints, and you have sinners that are very, very powerful sinners.
It was here at the college where the visiting bishops held some of their working sessions. When it was time to feed the body as well as the soul, the bishops joined the 150 seminarians for a typical Italian lunch: salad, 4-cheese pasta, veal, and an apple or a banana for dessert. As is the custom in Italy, the noontime meal is the biggest one of the day. The days living here at the college in the 1950s were big ones in the life of the Archbishop. And it was a feeling he wanted to pass on to the newest generation of students. One of the local seminarians in Rome is Larry Lott of Mobile, a member of Little Flower Parish. Larry, whose room offers a view of St. Peter's, is finishing up his first cycle of study at the local universities. I asked him how studying in Rome is different from the courses he could have taken back home.
The experience has been unique in that we're in such a different cultural setting. The language of the university is Italian, so the first thing you have to confront is the language difficulties of going to classes in Italian, learning how Italian culture works. It's comparative in the studies we do, except that our courses, we have students from 98 different countries in the class with us. So we have an opportunity to see much more of the universal church than we ever would just in the United States.
Even though he's thousands of miles from Mobile, he's not out of touch with his family. Their pictures cover the walls. However, he does miss Mobile at one special time of year.
I miss Mobile, especially around Mardi Gras time. I miss that very much.
When he isn't in class, Steve's staff of St. Robert's in Atmore spends much of his time here, using the college's computers. In this case, he's typing up class notes. I asked Steve how he dealt with moving from a small city like Atmore to a big city like Rome.
It's a tremendous difference, obviously. Makes me appreciate it all the more. I think I'll never take a small town for granted again. Rome is big and noisy and a bit of pollution all, but you get used to it after a little while. It's not so bad as it would first appear. When you first come here, it's a little bit overwhelming with all the sights and all.
How will his experience in Rome make him a better priest?
Is exposure to a broader worldview. I think we don't just see what we think about the church in America, as Americans, we get to see what other people think about us. And then I have seen how other people view the church in their own countries.
While away from Alabama, he keeps in contact with home, especially during the fall. Does he miss football?
Yes, I'm a graduate of Auburn, so I miss Auburn. I miss Auburn football. I still call home on the night of the Alabama-Auburn game and to see what the score is. And we wait here with anxious hopes all the time. All the guys here, most of them have big teams back home. So we wait for the USA Today or the Herald Tribune every Monday to see what the scores are. So yeah, I do miss it. That's one thing I will be glad to get back home for.
The visiting bishops came home in a way, too, by paying a special trip to one of the sites they must visit during this trip to Rome. It's one of the city's major basilicas called St. Paul's outside the walls of the ancient city of Rome. Under this altar, St. Paul is buried. The canopy over the altar is more than 700 years old. The bishops celebrated Mass beneath this 13th century Byzantine-style mosaic. The Pope who commissioned the work can be seen as a tiny figure at Christ's feet. The coats of arms of popes from the early to mid-1800s decorate the ceiling. St. Paul's and the other sites around Rome are some of the reasons thousands visit this breathtaking city. There are plenty of tourists visiting Rome these days, taking life easy. But there's nothing easy or cheap about living in or visiting Rome. This suit is a bargain at 360,000 lira. That's about 288 US dollars. How about some shoes to match? They're about $94. The socks? You better be well heeled, they're $10 a pair. What if you want to brave the Roman traffic and buy a small car of your own? You can drive down the Via in this beauty, an Italian-made Fiat Croma four-door sedan, for 22 million lira. That's about $17,600. Need a drink after hearing that price? This can of Diet Coke in Rome could cost you about $1.30. If the prices make you feel faint, you may want to head back to your less than spacious hotel room. Accommodations like this, a tight squeeze for one person, will cost $148 a night. Do these prices bother the Romans? No. In fact, little seems to bother them. Just look at the way they park. The store hours, too, are casual. Most shops open about 8, but close about 1 and don't reopen again until 4. On Sundays, everything, from stores to restaurants, shuts down. While we were there, one bank closed early because it ran out of paper for its adding machines. No problem. In the evening, people love to walk, to see and be seen, to play cards at an empty table, to sample some delicious Italian ice cream called gelato, devour the fresh-made pastries, or just to hang out. One of Rome's landmarks is the Colosseum, the largest Roman amphitheater in the world. It could probably hold 50,000 people. Dedicated in the year 80, it was the site of great spectacle and great tragedy. Gladiators would duel with each other or wild animals. Christians were later brought to this site, condemned to die by fighting unarmed against soldiers or animals. Within walking distance of the Colosseum is this, Caesar's Forum, at the foot of the old Roman capital. Work began here about 51 years before Christ. The 3 standing columns in the center are all that's left of the Temple of Venus Genetrix. It was one of the best museums of its day, featuring a golden statue of Cleopatra, Greek paintings, and even a statue of Caesar's horse. Around the corner is a gigantic monument in honor of King Victor Emmanuel II, who unified Italy in 1870 with Rome as its capital. The striking white marble stands as a contrast to the rest of the architecture in the area. It's filled with ornate bronze and stone statues. Trajan's Column stands 125 feet high across the street. It's made of 17 marble drums sculpted in spiral panels. The statue of St. Peter, now atop the column, has been there for about 400 years. You find respect for the past in Rome and here at the Vatican, a past filled with some very bright and some very dark moments. Just as the city of Rome has begun to clean and bring new life to its statues and monuments, the Catholic Church is in the continuing process of renewing itself. Visits like this one by Archbishop Lipscomb enable the local church and the Vatican to keep that shared process alive. I'm Bob Grip, reporting from Rome. Thanks for joining us. Good night.